The Meredith decision of 2007, the Supreme Court decision of Meredith versus the Jefferson County Board of Education, is going to undo Brown versus Board of Education. We're going to go back to the Plessy versus Ferguson when separate was equal. So we're going to have more predominant black schools and more predominant white schools where integration basically failed. The integration failed. We don't have integration. We have quit separating the restrooms and so it's not as overt as it was before, but now it's basically it's covert, right? In housing, jobs, academic achievement, there's a gap. And so where I was talking about how basically white schools are going to be deprived of sort of diversity and different ideas and different perspectives, I think that black schools are actually going to do really well. They're going to, when they work with the neighborhood schools, they're going to basically, they have, it's the same thing that Bell Hooks had to go through, that you had to get involved and you actually had to give a shit about the whole child, not just, okay, I'm the boss and I know, all this knowledge about history. It's, who gives a shit about history if you're hungry? There's 10,000 kids that have no house or homeless. If you're hungry or if there's crime that's happening all the time, how are you actually going to learn anything? So in order to truly teach the black students, they're going to have to embrace their whole life. So it's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They have to have food, water, clothing. They got to have safety. They got to have love and belonging. They got to have confidence. And then once they have those four traits on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, then they can become self-actualized, which means true learning can actually happen. So I think this is going to be, the racism isn't going to go bad. It's going to polarize actually both schools. It's, if you're going to have predominantly, white schools getting whiter and black schools getting blacker, then the racism that's still prevalent today, right? And I wouldn't say, I would make a distinction between racialist and racist, okay? Because racist is like a negative connotation, right? It's a black person who says, I hate white people, or it's white people that say, I hate black people. That's a racist, right? You just base the color of their skin is what you think about, who they are as individuals, when we should be judging by their character, okay? Clearly, right? Of course, skin color doesn't actually make a difference. There are generalizations that can be made. So when the U.S. Census says that there's 20% black folks in Louisville, that's racialist, okay? So I think when you're describing race in America, that's racialist, but not necessarily racist. And Malcolm X used the term too. So a racialist doesn't necessarily mean, that it's a negative connotation, but more of an observation. And I would say I'm racialist. In fact, in America, man, I've tried so hard to fucking break all this shit, because nobody literally is white or black, and I think every one of y'all need to go back to kindergarten, right? This is like pink or peach or sort of, it's not white. Like, I mean, white is this color, right? This is white. Does that look like the same color to you? And if it does, then you need to get your eyes checked, because it's not the fucking same color. Then my teeth, all right, they're white. My eyeballs, they're white there. I got black in my eyeball too. I'm also 11% African, which means I have black blood coursing through my veins. The one drop rule back in the white supremacy days automatically kicks me out the white race if I had one drop, and 11% means I got a shit ton of drops. So great. Actually, that is wonderful. It's like the best, my favorite part of me, because being white meant conforming into the culture that's going on, meant ignoring your German heritage, your Irish heritage, your history, your tongue, your language, your entire, culture is just basically shredded just so you could jump into this dominant white society. And what is this dominant white society? What's it based on? Well, it started on slavery, right? So there's a white supremacy essence that's going on. And that's why Martin Luther King, once he got Civil Rights Act passed and he started, integration started happening, he expressed some doubts, and he's like, is it a good idea to integrate into a burning building? Right? So, and that's how a lot of Germans and Irish and some of the other Europeans that came in that weren't considered English, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, how they joined in the white people as they conformed. And what's conforming into their culture? Well, they're genociders, they're slavers, be racist, right? Basically fuck over the black man. That's how the white people who came in and conformed, that's how they did it. And actually there's I forget who said it, but that's basically all white politics is, who could screw over the black man. But there's some, enclaves of Germans who actually still speak the German tongue, who still hold on to their language and culture, and so they actually went sort of a different direction. And I think it's a better direction and a smarter direction, because while I don't like the idea, you know, I love the dream of becoming a melting pot. We're all Americans, we're all the same, but we're a nation of immigrants, okay? So what would be, I could see both ways happen. I could see everybody being in a room and being one big happy family, but I could also see the necessity of having a group kind of maintain their own sort of, you know, enclave, and that way they have political clout, and then they can give everybody some freedom. So sort of, you know, you have your salad bowl and you have your different sections of the cities, and then you build up the clout, and then you could be able to, you know, just plow on through, right, and use that political clout in order to get yourself some freedom. And then even though, you know, you're not living together, you can work together, you can go shopping together, you can go to entertainment, you know, places together. So I'm gonna carry on with this this article, and you know, I don't know, I don't feel bad for the white folks or whatever. I do think that they're going to be missing out, because black folks have such a wonderful, man, I love black culture. Like, you have no idea, and it's really disheartening to me, because I've stood up against white supremacy for a long ass time, and I don't hear many black folks stand up against black supremacy. And how do you combat black supremacy? Came about through white supremacy. So what's going to combat black supremacy, right? So white supremacy? No, like, I mean, that, yeah, probably, that's right, but I hope they just kind of knock each other out. But there's you know, you can be proud of who you are, there's nothing wrong with that, but to say that, like, you know, we're all humans, like, so to say, like, you know, the Mexican race is the best damn race on the country, the Native Americans is the best race on the country. I mean, you can feel proud of yourself and you can get sort of pride, but I don't know. I think it's interesting that I have African blood and that I'm Bavarian and Prussian, and I got, you know, German influence and Bohemian and Austrian. I think that makes me more of a fuller person, because I actually have roots and I know where I came from. But how much pride can I really have? How can I get out of that? There's something to be said about nationalism. There's, you know, being American is being a nationalist, right? We're all Americans. There's also being Kentuckian. That's basically being anything, right? It's a nationalism. But Malcolm X said a lot of the revolutions that had happened in Africa was coming about because of nationalism, because, you know, it was black power, because of black power. And there's 1965, we saw that happen here in America. Alright, let's get through this article, and if I have time, I'll do some more commentary. So the case came about 4 years ago when Meredith sued the school system after her son Josh, then a kindergartner, was denied a transfer to a school near her home. So Crystal Meredith wanted her son Josh to go to the school that was closest to home. When he was in kindergarten, she was denied. She files a lawsuit. So it's a white mother on the East End. So Josh had been assigned to school in Maddie Jones's neighborhood across town, and a transfer would have tilted the school's enrollment too heavily African American against the district's guidelines. So the case came about 4 years ago when Meredith sued the school system after her son Josh. Wait, Meredith? Yeah, no, Crystal Meredith, that's right. So then Josh had been assigned to school in Maddie Jones's neighborhood across town. So, okay. That's the white woman's story. What's best for my child? So now you got Meredith. Crystal Meredith said she believed that the racially and ethnically diverse Bloom Elementary School nearby was the best educational fit for Josh. This never had anything to do with race. Crystal Meredith said, I was just wanting what was best for my child. Maddie Jones and her husband, whose father had founded one of the first African-American boarding schools in Piney Woods, Mississippi in the late 1800s, also believed that education was the way to a better life. I grew up in a segregated society, Maddie Jones says, and I did not want my children to suffer like I had suffered. But in Louisville and across America, equality and educational opportunity was still an unattained goal, despite the court's landmark 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling, which outlawed separate but equal schools. Right? And then that opens the door for Martin Luther King to start marching and to get integration and to end the divide that's happening in our country. So that opens the door. So what's Meredith versus the Jefferson County Public Schools going to do? That's going to open the doors for segregation to be allowed, right? So for 20 years after that decision, many big city school systems made grudging, half-hearted efforts to equalize educational opportunity with a variety of methods. Some inner-city schools were renovated, although the decision also prompted wholesale white flight to the suburbs where new schools were built and students were enrolled in private parochial schools. Forced busing brings taunts, then riots. So this is sort of what Bell Hooks went through, Matty Jones, probably, I don't know, Martin Luther King or not, but his kids definitely, right? So in Louisville, too, whites fled the city for an affluent parts of the county to the east, while on the city's predominantly black west side, the schools fell into disrepair, understaffed, and under-resourced, with children sharing tattered books and educators scrounging for scarce teaching tools. Iroquois High School has a 50% graduation rate, so those incoming freshmen, only 50% of them are going to end up graduating. So there's still some dismal statistics that's going on there too. There's 150 schools that's in Louisville, so you can't say like all across the board, but we do have like 20 of the worst schools in the entire state of Kentucky. So finally in 1975, a federal judge ordered Jefferson County to integrate the city's public schools, right? 1975. When children climbed onto buses on September 8th that year, September 8th, 1975, and rode across town to different schools, Matty Jones's daughter Taffy and Grace were among the first, and it was a jarring experience for them. Believe it or not, there are some children that had never seen a black child, Matty Jones says, recalling how her girls were shocked by the reaction to their presence. They could not understand why they were called the N-word because they had never heard it in their neighborhood schools. Aside from the occasional taunts and noisy demonstrations where opponents of busing honked their horns, shouted slogans, waved Confederate flags, the first 2 days of what whites called forced busing in Louisville were relatively quiet. Then rioting broke out. White demonstrators, some called to the city by local leaders of the Ku Klux Klan, firebombed storefronts, clashed with the police. The governor ordered state troopers and National Guard troops to ride the buses that carried African-American children. Matty Jones's daughter, Taffy, then a 14-year-old, remembers that when the bus pulled up, we pulled up to sticks, clubs, bricks, and bottles. There are mobs of angry white demonstrators yelling, shouting, and physically rocking our bus as it arrived at Dawes High School, 6 miles to the east of their home. Taffy says the demonstrators were shouting things at us, the N-word, obscenities, go back to Africa. Racism and hostility linger. Though the demonstrators probably numbered only a few hundred at most, as a little girl, Taffy recalled it seemed like thousands of people. And I'm so far away from home, and it was a feeling that all of them were trying to get me, and it was an awful, awful experience I'll never forget. Matty Jones' son, Michael, whom she enrolled in Atherton High School on the east side of Louisville, where he was one of fewer than 20 black students 5 years before busing began, said he too was met with open hostility. The school's nickname was the Rebels. Owen County is still the Rebels. Boone County is still the Rebels, right? So there's still these Confederate mascots. I think they even have like a Confederate, like, you know, a cowboy hat and a Confederate flag and a sword and shit. So this is in Kentucky. Boone County and Owen County is northern Kentucky. So that would be right where the, you know, the Underground Railroad had to go through those northern counties in order to cross over to the north side. But there's racism very prevalent even in those towns. I mean, their mascots, the Rebels. The Rebels. Like, today, 2014, you're still being like, you know, there's nothing wrong with being a rebel to rebel against the status quo, but to say that you're the Confederate rebels, to say that you're, you know, you side with the people that had fought to the death to defend the right of the institution of slavery, when there's only 10,000 slave owners in the South, so only 10,000 slave owners in the South wanted, you know, to keep this peculiar institution, as they had called it, and you had these all these white people just basically just dying, you know, just going and dying for these rich fucking paymasters. Kind of on both sides too. There's industrialists in the North, but there was, you could have done slavery different, you know. It didn't have to be a war. They could have been paid out. All of Western Hemisphere didn't have, they didn't get their slavery, you know, undone through war. They did it through other gradual means, like buying them out. Haiti was a slave rebellion. Nat Turner was a slave rebellion. But there's, it's just so obvious. It's so, you know, like, it makes no sense. You have a family, a white family controlling 30 slaves or shit. Why would the slaves not pick up arms and go against those who are oppressing them? And if you're, you know, they wouldn't be able to organize and do some of that stuff on their own, being under that oppression. But once you had somebody sort of saying, hey, here's some guns, here's the plan, let's get it done, and we're all going to do this, it just seems inevitable. I like Lincoln's strong arm in this thing. He's, you know, I don't know if he tricked everybody for the Union or if he was actually, you know, basically a racist who was like, well, shit, I'm going to use this as a war tactic in order to get some more troops. Regardless, it sets, you know, it opened the door up to a different type of world. Basically, wage slavery, right? Now, sharecropping and working for other people and renting your services out instead of people owning you, which is happening today. I mean, that's what you do when you get a job, right? When you work at Walmart, you're a wage slave. You're renting your services out. And that was actually a defense for slavery, saying, would you take care of something you owned better or something you rented? Which is actually it's a fascinating argument. But it's bullshit. Slavery's fucking horseshit. There's so many fucking horrible things that came out of slavery. So good for Lincoln for stopping slavery.